Hello, I am Steve Robbins, and I am here with Dan Ariely. I hope I pronounced that correctly.
Close enough. Close enough.
The author of the new book Misbelief, and I have the cover here. The book itself is sitting open on my desk.
Hello, I am Steve Robbins, and I am here with Dan Ariely. I hope I pronounced that correctly.
Where is that coming from? Hang on one second.
Close enough.
Wow, you gotta love modern technology. I was getting feedback from my browser.
How long do you want to go for?
I normally do these for about half an hour. I have plenty of time after that, though, if you want to keep going, and because if we're really getting into things. So I'm here. Let's try this again. I'm here with Dan Ariely.
You want to pause and start again, or just running?
Nah, I mean, this is going out live, so.
Oh,
yeah. So everyone gets to enjoy the real-time nature of modern technology.
Very good. Very exciting.
So Dan is the author of the new book Misbelief: What Makes Rational People Believe Irrational Things, which has just come out and was inspired in part by the COVID-19 epidemic, but also by other things. Welcome, Dan.
Lovely to see you. It's been too long.
It has been quite a while, and there's been a pandemic in the meantime. One of the things that I'm really, well, first of all, do people often point out the relationship between you and Madonna and your business strategy?
No, they have not. So I'm very curious.
All right. So in roughly 1986, Madonna was involved with Sean Penn. I believe they were married and they had an abusive relationship. And she got out of it, and as revenge, I don't know if it was actually revenge, she then took all of the things that had happened in the relationship, put them into musical form, and had a multi-platinum album, Like a Prayer, and that was sort of her big impetus for the next phase of her career. So I'm curious, I know that something similar has happened to you, and that this book in part is a result of your own circumstances. What happened?
Yep. Yeah. So what happened? So sometimes the fall is the most painful when it comes from a high. So COVID started, and all of a sudden, lots of people around the world realized that social science had something important to say. And I started getting calls from all over the world about all kinds of topics. Distant education, releasing prisoners, fines, penalties, mask wearing, domestic violence, you name it. And I sit there, and I have two phones and my laptop, and I try as fast as I can to help as much as I can. And I feel this incredible sense of gratification. I feel I'm a helpful citizen. I'm really happy. And all of a sudden I get an email that says, Dan, what happened to you? How did you change this way? And I write quickly back. I said, how have I changed this way? And I get an email later with a long list of links that explain how I've changed. I'll just describe one of them. And that was a video that described how I was in hospital for almost 3 years because of my burns. True, I have lots of scars and burns. This is why I don't have hair on this side. But then it goes to describe how because of that I started hating healthy people, and that's why I joined Bill Gates and the Illuminati and the Cabal to try and kill as many healthy people as possible with the virus, with the vaccine, all kinds of things like that. So that happened, and my first instinct
I have to ask you,
was to explain.
Did that happen, or have you joined forces with the Illuminati?
So the application process was very tough. So I did not, but it wasn't because I didn't want to. It was just that the bureaucracy involved, the documentation. Okay, so of course I don't even know where to apply. Okay, so my first instinct was to explain myself, is to go and just say, no, this is not true. Here's the things I've done, and here's the things I don't know. And I had the wisdom to call a few friends in PR and ask them if they think it's a good idea to go and try to defend myself. And they said, no, it's a terrible idea. Leave it alone. But I couldn't. my personality structure is such that I couldn't get all of these people to have such terrible thoughts about me. So I went into about a month of trying to defend myself. I called people, I invited somebody to my house, I joined online discussions, I had a podcast with people, I joined Telegram groups and all kinds of things, and I failed miserably. I convinced almost nobody, and I had a terrible, terrible month. But then at the end of that month, slow learner, but I learned at some point, at the end of that month, I decided I need to understand what's going on. And it's one thing to think, oh, there are some people who believe the earth is flat or whatever, but these attacks were so brutal and so personal, and there was so much of like, but here's a fact. And so the next 2 years I spent trying to understand what is going on. And I don't know about you, but I feel that there are people in my circles that 5 years ago I felt that we have the same perspective on life, and that we align and we understand and so on, and we share a lot about in our worldview. And now I look at some of those people and I say, how can we be of the same species? And because if somebody likes the color green or whatever, yellow, and I don't like it, it's fine. But some of those changes in deep beliefs are so strange that we look at them and we say, how can that be? How can that be that the machinery that is operating in that person looks at the same world and comes up with such different conclusions? But this process, this book, it's a little bit about my personal story, but hopefully not too much. But it's mostly about this psychological machinery that takes people and changes them. I call this the funnel of misbelief. And it's really a view at all of the different elements that contribute, and there are many of them, all of the different elements that contribute to this descent down the funnel of misbelief until people at the end get to be very different people. But just to be clear, every step that somebody takes on that funnel is a negative step. They lose something, we lose something. It's not just that, if people become conspiracy theorists, that's a terrible outcome, but everything in the middle is okay. No. The moment people start adopting any misbeliefs, they lose something, and we as a society lose something.
So, because I usually talk about business topics, one of the things that I'm interested in, and I'll let other people interview you about some of the more dastardly conspiracy theories, but as I was reading the book, you talked about the things that prime someone to be in a mindset that allows them to start forming misbeliefs and going down the slippery slope. And COVID, in some ways, was a perfect storm. We had COVID, we had social media, there's a lot of different pieces. As I was reading that, however, my mind actually went someplace slightly different, which is because I live in the business world, and I have done work in corporate environments, and I've done work in academic environments, and I have done work in startup and kind of small company environments. I have noticed that we have a lot of, I'll call them misbeliefs, and maybe I'm being too extreme, but belief plays a real role in the way the corporate cultures unfold, in the way that people even choose what products to go after next. One of the things that I always find fascinating is if you look at the high-tech industry, the entire industry is a history of somebody dominates the market, whether it's for mainframe computers, mini computers, microcomputers, graphical user interfaces, web-based, whatever. They dominate the market, and they then believe themselves to be so completely unassailable that they miss the entire next wave of technology. And as I was reading your book, I was thinking, wow, there's some interesting belief stuff going on there too. And then, of course, right now, in the aftermath of COVID, we have people who have very strong beliefs about returning to the office, who have very strong beliefs about, should we be ventilating our buildings? Should we, do masks kill people? That's somewhat related to the whole COVID thing. Can you tell us what are some of the factors that cause someone to go down the misbelief trail, and how do those occur just in our daily lives in ways that might be affecting us and our loved ones and we don't even realize it?
Yeah. So I'll give like a very quick view of the overview of the funnel of misbelief. The breeding ground for misbeliefs is usually stress. It's stress, not usually. It's stress. And it's not the stress of, oh, I'm so busy. It's the stress of feeling hard done by, like Job. Like, where is this coming from? Why am I not doing well? Why did I get promoted? Why did I get fired? Why is my significant other? Why? Including violence in the country, including all kinds of things. Our brain accumulate those and experiences in stress. And what happens in stress is we want some certainty. That's why people adopt superstitions. It's why we look for stories that explain something. It's like why we look for a story with a villain. So the breeding ground is stress. Then there's the cognitive element, the way we process information in all kinds of ways. There's the personality element, and then there's the social element, and that kind of seals the deal. Now, when you're talking about kind of the work environment, I think you're thinking kind of the cognitive component and the social component. And if we're talking about the question of this, you say, companies that have created something, and they're not innovating anymore, they are certain of their own belief. What's going on there? So if we think about the cognitive component, the first thing I would think about is that our confidence is often misaligned with the real knowledge. And this goes by a couple of names. The Dunning-Kruger effect is one, the illusion of, so there's a couple of names that it goes by, the illusion of explanatory depth and the Dunning-Kruger effect. And I'll give you one example from the illusion of explanatory depth. My demonstration of this is as follows. I go to people and I say, do you understand how a flush toilet works? One of those things that you do this and the water comes up, and people say yes. On a scale from 0 to 100, I understand flush toilet. Now we say, okay, luckily for you, here are all the pieces of a flush toilet. Can you assemble one? And you can imagine how it works. Almost nobody can assemble it. And what's interesting is that once you ask people to assemble it, and then you come back to them and you say, hey, how much do you understand a flush toilet? They say, I don't understand it that well. And usually when we try to convince people, we come at them with information. You don't think this is true? Let me attack you. Let me attack you. Let me attack you. The problem with attacking is that once you attack people, they are in a defensive mode. They are protecting against you. They're not really listening. Like you give me counter arguments. I am counter arguing. I'm not even listening and digesting what you're saying. I'm just thinking about how to reject it. That's the way the mechanism is working.
And I just want to be clear, we're talking right now about like work environments or about any place, because I'm sitting here thinking, yeah, I recognize that from my relationship when, I just cannot admit that I was the one who left the cap off the tube of toothpaste. It must have been a mysterious intruder.
That's right. So it's true for everything, but it's true also at the workplace. Right? And if you think about kind of not just people, but organizations have a way to fight attacks on their beliefs, right? For a long time, we all thought that Facebook was going to be the next frontier of democracy. We believed it. People at Facebook believed it. Maybe they believed it first, and then we believed it. But anyway, we believed it. And then when evidence started coming to show up the opposite, both the people at Facebook but also the organization had a way to basically not accept that, right? To fight against it. So when you say about why don't organizations react to information, is it because the people and the organization don't like information that comes and confronts us? And we find ways to discount it, to avoid it, to interpret it in different ways. Sometimes this is called motivated reasoning. You give me a piece of data, I don't look at it objectively. I say, this is actually something else. It only applies in, whatever. But the illusion of explanatory depth tells us that the right way to approach things is not to attack, but to come to people and say, help me understand. So I gave you an example with the flush toilet, but this has been shown in many, many things. Like, do you understand how a zipper works? Do you understand how a virus works? Do you understand how photography works? Do you understand how a helicopter works, and so on? And every time you get people, okay, so just explain to me, walk me through the details. We even did it with the elections. Do you understand how the election works? Do you understand how stealing the election could work? The moment you get people to view their assumption, and the idea is that our knowledge is limited, but our confidence is higher. And when we ask for the details, not in a confrontational, we have to come up with it. We say, oh my goodness, I don't understand this. So when you ask the question of how can we as organization stop kind of our groupthink, our default option, our resistance to different opinion, one approach is to use the illusion of explanatory depth and basically say, let's explain how this technology is going to actually win over. Let's explain why this is in fact better. Not to say you're wrong, but let's explain the mechanism behind it. The other trick I like is a statement that asked, what would it take to change your mind? So, and what's nice about this is you don't tell me you're wrong. You say, you tell me what is your standard for change. Under what condition would you change your opinions? And by the way, when you ask people this way, sometimes they say, well, nothing would get me to change my opinion. Mm-hmm. and then we know something about what we are. But once people start thinking about it and creating something clear, that really helps. So when we think about the cognitive component of the funnel of misbelief, we say there are ways to try and improve on what's going on, like the illusion of explanatory depth and so on. And that's important for individuals, and it's important for organizations. There's also a personality trait called intellectual humility.
It's intellectual
humility. And the idea of intellectual humility, the name is kind of a little bit too it feels to me judgmental. Oh, you're not intellectual. You don't have intellectual humility. But it's really about our willingness to live with multiple hypotheses, competing hypotheses at the same time. I think that X is right, but maybe not. I think that Y is correct, but I'm willing to entertain the idea that it's not. And the moment you have at least some belief in the opposite hypothesis, you're not as dogmatic. And it's tough to live in the ambiguity, right? It's tough for people to say, oh, I'm not sure about the world. We want a solution, especially when we're stressed. And it's tough for organizations. Organizations feel like we need to align in one direction and we have to be confident and we have to do this. That's a good thing, but it has a cost. And the cost is that unless you basically create, like we're not 100% sure that our way is the right way, it will be very hard to change direction.
This reminds me of, if I remember correctly, the Macintosh development team back in the 1980s. Steve Jobs actually sequestered them in a physically different location because he thought that if he kept them with the mainstream engineering group at Apple, they wouldn't be able to think outside the box enough to be able to do that. That sounds like a instance of how he dealt with it, at least.
That's right. And he's not the only one who's done it. Other companies have done it as well, which is to basically say, let's take another group. But it's not just another group at the organization level, but it's also about people. It's about being comfortable with not being very sure. I think scientists are supposed to be good at this, right? Scientists are supposed to enjoy the process of not knowing. Ooh, here's a new mystery. I'm going to really enjoy finding out, right? I don't want it to be over too soon. I really want the process of thinking and figuring out and so on. So that's a very healthy approach. If we can get that going on the individual level, and as a like it's a part of personality, right? It's kind of it's something that you apply to everything in life. If an organization can adopt that as a tenant, that would be very good.
So you need
And then
ambiguity, but what you don't need is 20 different groups going in 20 different directions. So you somehow need controlled ambiguity to stay sane.
Yeah. You want a positive approach to some ambiguity. And the ambiguity that you want is that this is the direction we're going, but it doesn't have to be that this is the ultimate one, and this other direction could also be effective. And then the last component from the funnel of misbelief that applies to organization is the question of the social forces at work. And the social forces at work are very very strong. And there's one force that is very important called ostracism. And the guy who did most of the work on this basically tells a story that he goes to the park with his dog, and he walks with the dog and he sees two people playing frisbee. And all of a sudden, by mistake, the frisbee falls next to his feet. He picks it up, he throws it to one of them, and to his surprise, they throw it back. And for a few minutes, the three of them play frisbee. And then at some point, they stop throwing it to him, and they start playing just the two of them. And he describes how he felt rejected, ostracized. Now, he didn't know these people, he didn't come to the park to play with them, but still, the moment in which they stop throwing to you and you're still here waiting, you can imagine how it's a tough moment. And he then went on and did lots of experiments, actually using the same paradigm of people playing between three people and then stopping at some point to throw to one of them and seeing what happens. And it's a devastating effect. It's a devastating effect. It influences optimism and well-being. It influences dishonesty. It influences just everything. It's amazing. Altruism, willingness to help. Now, if we think about groupthink and organization and ostracism, that's a big risk, because and if we say something about conspiracies for a second, we've all made fun of people who have different opinions. But of course, when we make fun of them, we think it's a little bit of fun, but they perceive it as a big fun, right? And there's kind of asymmetry in there where whatever the beliefs are, the accepted beliefs of the organization, if somebody is daring to have a different opinion, there's a risk of ostracism. And whatever ostracism is done is very likely to be perceived in a much, much bigger way. And what happened is that basically gets people not to say their opinions. And the easiest way to think about it, of course, is in the political realm. Think about all kinds of things that people on the right, even if they believe something not like the group, they can't say. And think about things on the left, that people that even if they feel not like the majority or the accepted truth or whatever, that they can't say it. The social pressures there are incredibly strong.
Well, yeah, and even as you point that out, I'm thinking that I've heard of plenty of companies where they explicitly prohibit political discussions at work, or I think Basecamp. It's a virtual company. 37 Signals is the name of the company, and they have been a virtual company since their founding, like 20 years ago. They've been around a long time. And during COVID, if I remember correctly, basically the company had a bit of an implosion and lost 40% of their employees because people were getting into political discussions, and then the management said, "Hey, no more political discussions at work," and the explanation of the management was, we want this, we don't want everyone at each other's throats. But of course, the very act of saying no political discussions at work itself becomes political. And there was a big kerfluffle.
Yeah, I talked to one of the big social networks a short while ago. I've talked to them a lot over these last few years as I attempt to understand what's going on and what is their role in this. And one of the things I told them is that I don't want my feed or my kids' feed to be conspiracy theory clean. I don't want it to be just my political opinion. I think that what we need to do is we need to figure out ways to live with this complexity. Just to take an example, let's say I would just say, oh, for my daughter, don't show her ever anything that is, conspiracy theory on, the cabal. I don't think it's a good idea. At some point, you'll have to deal with this. Why is not showing that really the right approach, or should we basically say, let's figure out how to deal with this? So I think I can see why they reacted to it, because they probably were kind of in the, oh my goodness, what's going on? Let's just stop it. I think I can understand where the gut reaction for this is coming from, but I don't think it's the right approach. I think that we do live together, we work together, we need to care about each other. I mean, there's all kinds of things that need to happen, and respecting political discourse is incredibly important. And I'll tell you one other thing. So we talked about stress. One of the things that is the best inoculation against stress is feeling loved and supported by close people. So resilience, parts of resilience, right? I think the workplace has a lot to contribute there. Yes, the workplace is a workplace and so on, but I think workplace used to create friendship more than it does now. It used to be a source of resilience. People got other people that they could count on from the workplace. Now, we don't think of it as an official role of the workplace, but I think everybody benefits if the workplace is a place to have real friends, to have deep, meaningful relationship, to create people that you can trust. Because let's compare. Let's say I have a friend in the city, one city over. That's great, and I trust them, and I meet them from time to time, and so on. If I have a neighbor that I trust, I can also ask them to pick up the mail. I can knock on their door at night if I need help, and the same thing is true for a work colleague, right? It's having somebody you can count on in close proximity is incredibly important. And if we basically say, no, you're just here to work, nothing personal, nothing, I don't think it's helpful. I can see why it's make life easier from a PR, from a HR legal perspective, but I don't think it's the right approach.
What do you think about? I know that some of the discussions that I've seen around the workplace in recent months, there's really two things that come to mind. One is companies doing massive layoffs, even though they just had or are having their most profitable a year ever. And then the second is really the return to office discussion. And I know that, in the case of layoffs, Sundar, the CEO of Google, was amazed that, this was affecting morale, which I'm amazed that he's amazed. And in the case of return to office, the CEO of Amazon recently came out and actually said, we have no data supporting that this is a good idea, but we want everyone to do this anyway. And in the event that we were to start collecting data, we're pretty sure that it wouldn't be convincing. Now, can you talk a little bit about how this plays in to the whole misbelief model? Because there seem to be a lot of connections there, actually.
So let's take the two topics separately. Let's think about layoffs. There are basically two types of layoffs. Layoffs that people understand and accept, and layoffs that they don't understand where it came from. And if we go back to the stress notion, hard done by. Why me and not other people? Like what is going on here, right? In the case of Google, I don't know if you remember that story. There was a guy who had a deadline, and he showed up at the Google office very early in the morning to finish his deadline. His key did not work out, and only then, when he called security, he found out that he was fired. That's where did it come from? Why did I? Here's somebody incredibly dedicated. So when we think about the kind of layoffs that people cannot understand, that actually creates lots of stress. And of course, it creates lots of stress for the people who lost their job, because now they say, when will it happen next? What's the rules of the world? And I think, but it also works on the people who stayed, because they are also a little bit stressed, and they also don't understand, and they also start wondering what's next. And if you understand how negative stress is of this type, of the I don't understand how the world works, then you would give a story. You would work harder on helping people understand why some people lost their jobs, even if it's not the most comfortable story, right? Even if you say, look, we have the most money last year, we have plenty of money, we are in no risk, but McKinsey told us to cut 5% of the workforce, and they gave this amazing presentation with 500 PowerPoint pages, and we got convinced, and that what we do, and here's our process. Hire McKinsey, whatever the process is. I'm just joking about McKinsey, it could be anybody.
Right.
But once you explain the story, then people they better understand where it comes from. There's less stress for the people who are leaving, and also for the people who are staying. So incredibly important to create.
So just one second. What if I educate people as to the story, for example, they may not like the story or agree with the story, but just having a story, it sounds like, is important.
Because now it's more predictable. I might not like it, but at least I don't have to wake up every morning and say, is it coming today?
Right.
So if I say,
we haven't had any McKinsey cars in the parking lot today, so I'm probably safe for another week.
Yes. No, and hopefully it's not a week. Like, imagine, say, look, we start this process, we do once a year, whatever the process is, it gives some notion. And I don't think you know this, but on the last 7 years, I have been ranking companies on their human capital. So almost all Fortune 1000, I have a ranking for them for how well they treat the employees and how the employees feel about the company. And then I look at the relationship between that and stock market returns.
Interesting.
And
okay.
It turns out that fairness is incredibly important, as you would suspect. That actual level of salaries don't matter as much. Fairness of salary matters a lot. Actual promotion don't matter as much. Fairness in promotion matters a lot. I can go into more detail. That's another story. You can come back to it another day. But if people feel that something is unfair, then it affects also their motivation. Okay. The second big question you asked is, what do I think about work from home, work from the office? And let me just warn you that you might not like my answer.
Oh no! All right.
I think that working from the office is very important, and I'll tell you. Let me ask you to think about it in two ways. Imagine we run a big company, and we do a survey, and we say, from next week, how many of you would like to come to the office 3 times a week? My guess is that very few people would say, yes, please, I want to come back. Because they think about next week, and they like their chair and their coffee and all kinds of things like that. We got used to it. But then, what if I said, the letter would be slightly different, and I would say, if you stayed working from home, what do you think would be the level of your human capital, your motivation, knowledge, and so on, in 5 years? And what will be your level of knowledge, promotion, motivation, and so on if you were 0 days in the office, 1 day, 3 day, 4 day, 5 days? And when you ask it this way, you're not asking about what do I feel like tomorrow. You're saying what would increase my human capital. And I think that every job that people have is a learning opportunity for the next job. Same company, different company, and so on. But it's a learning opportunity. We haven't arrived. We keep on improving all the time. And when you say how much would you learn and improve and so on if you stayed at home, most people say not so much. You know what? I recognize that my specific human capital, how much I know company X, and my general human capital, what an expert I'm in the field. The specific human capital only applies to my company, Duke University. The general applies to everybody. So one is, I understand accounting procedures better in this company. One of them says I'm a better professor. We understand that this improvement comes from other places. So that's one. I think that if we think about ourselves and companies, and everybody wants human capital to grow. We want our human capital to grow. Companies want our human capital to grow. And I think the odds of growing it, home is very efficient, but doesn't help us grow. But then there's another thing, which is there's lots of things that we don't even perceive, but are still very important. And I'll give you one strange example. There's a researcher, Noam Sobol, who shows that when people basically come to like a gathering place and they go to introduce themselves, they don't know anybody, and they start meeting new people. You meet new people, you shake their hands, and then many people after that experience, in the next 5 minutes, bring their hand up and smell their fingers. Now, you look shocked, and I was shocked, but it's true. You look at these videos, and people do that. Now, do people do it consciously? Of course not. But it turns out that we actually have a very good sense of smell. We live far from the ground, unlike dogs, so it's hard for us to smell, but when something gets close to us, we're able to smell. And of course, we all recognize how important smell is in romantic attraction. Right? That's very clear. It turns out it's also a good predictor of friendship. Like if I took a sample of sweat from your friends and some people you don't like so much, there would be some prediction there. Now, it's a strange example, but what I want to say is that
I like it. I mean, of all the things I'm going to take away from today, it's going to be when I meet someone, make sure to smell them.
That's right. But so first of all, what it means is that we have a lot of non-conscious ways to perceive other people. And smell, I give the smell example because we can't get it over Zoom or whatever, right? It's obviously it's not there. But it's not the only thing that we lose. You know, real smile doesn't come from the mouth, it comes from the little wrinkle on the side, and finishing each other's sentences takes place when we are without delay. Even small delays change it. And a tap on the shoulder and a high five, all of those things matter, and we don't even understand the social dynamics to even understand what we're losing. So when you say real life versus Zoom or whatever technology you use, doesn't matter, and you say what are we losing and what are we gaining? Gaining efficiency, meeting starts on time, end on time, people go through all the agenda, we understand all of that, but we don't even know all the things that we're giving up. We have not evolved in that environment,
right?
And we have all kinds of unconscious things that build relationship and trust and so on that we are far away from understanding. So when you ask me what are we missing, I say we don't even know yet. I can start thinking about what I would like to measure. Right? I would like to measure trust. I would like to measure empathy. I would like to measure interpersonal utility. How much am I willing to give up for something for you? There's all kinds of things that I'm willing to start thinking about. And I think it will take a long time to figure it out. It's not immediate, right? The things that are very clear immediate is I don't have to commute and I have better coffee.
Right.
And there's another thing. I'll tell you this one final story. When I was in hospital, I was fed by a tube for a very long time. So I had a tube that gave me 30 eggs a day and 7,000 calories a day. Badly burned, needed a lot of calories, protein to build back the muscle and skin and everything that I've lost. And after a few months, they come and they say, the day after tomorrow, we're taking away the tube, you'll start eating. And what do you think was my reaction? My reaction was, that's terrible. I said to myself, who wants to chew? Who wants to eat? I discovered the future. I said, in the future, nobody will waste time on this crazy activity. I don't think anybody would walk around with a tube, but we'll figure out pills or something that is efficient, that people don't have to waste terrible amount of time on food. And of course, they didn't listen to me. They took the tube out and I started eating. And guess what? I remember that food tastes quite well. And the point is that I forgot how food tastes like. Like if you ask me, does food have taste? I would say yes. But after almost 4 months, I couldn't really feel it and I didn't really miss it. And in some way, I think working from home is a little bit like this approach that, I thought of efficiency. Who wants to chew? Who wants to waste time? And so on. But it's not just about efficiency. Food is amazing. I can't stop eating. But there's also a big difference between food and work from home, which is food. The moment one of the first thing I tasted was strawberries. They only allow me to eat half a strawberry because they wanted me to eat calories, and they said strawberry was a waste. But I could taste the strawberry, and it was really wonderful. But with food, you can taste it and you remember immediately how food tastes like. Going back to work doesn't come back immediately. If we destroyed social relationships for 2 years, how long will it take to ignite them back? Well, it requires real effort. I think that just to get 50, let's say we have a company with 50 people, just to get 50 people who hate each other or dislike each other into a group, when you say, okay, these people used to like each other, they used to work together, now they were home for 2 years, now they're resentful, and they come back to this place and they just can't wait until they go back home to their chair and their coffee. That's how long will it take to build the friendships that we've lost? It will take a long time. It will need a concerted effort. So I think in some sense, the question of working from home, working from the office is not the right question. The right question is, can we create back the human fabric of work that would make work productive, interesting, fun, exciting, and so on? And what do we need to get there? It's not just about forcing people to come back to the office and punch a clock that they come in and come out. And
we could probably spend an entire hour just on this topic because I have certainly worked from home most of my career. And, so I've had to figure out how to get some of those social things other ways, etc. Also, I think it sounds like this relates a little bit to the stress, because I know that one of the reasons some people don't want to come back is they're still not convinced that workplaces have put in place adequate things like ventilation and policies that allow them to feel physically safe at work. Yeah. We're pretty much at 45 minutes. These usually go for half an hour. I have about 24 things still on my outline to ask you about. I wanted to talk about villains. I wanted to talk about how we have complex explanations for bad events, but not necessarily for good events. I wanted to talk about Elon Musk and the Twitter takeover and Elon's possible public slide into misbelief. If we believe that the things he amplifies on Twitter, he seems to have changed a lot of beliefs. But we're not going to have a chance to talk about any of that right now.
Yeah. But I'll because you're mostly focused on the workplace, let me just end with this one thought. So when we think about human capital and human motivation, we usually have a separation between intrinsic motivation and extrinsic motivation. And in general, we find that extrinsic motivation, salary, retirement, and so on, don't matter as much as people think, and intrinsic motivation matters a lot. Do I feel appreciated, psychological safety, and so on. One of the interesting things that happened during COVID is we find that the role of intrinsic motivation has increased. Why? Think about the kid in 7th grade. If the kid is in school, the teacher can say, sit straight, don't talk to Johnny, put your phone down. If the kid is at home, they can turn the teacher off. And adults are a little bit like kids as well. Just think about how many of us during COVID or work from home, not COVID, have basically said, my internet connection is not working that well, I'm turning the video off, or something like that. The work environment is designed for some monitoring as well, right? The things that we can get away with in a video call are very different than the things we can get away with an in-person call. And very few people say, all meetings are much better in Zoom because I'm paying as much attention and I'm learning as much. No, we recognize that we're giving up. So intrinsic motivation, the inside flame that people have for their job is becoming more important with work from home. And I think companies need to start understanding that. So companies always had to understand intrinsic motivation. But to the extent that work from home is here to stay, and I think it's here to stay at some level, HR needs to start understanding how intrinsic motivation works and how do we help people to have intrinsic motivation in general, but especially when they work from home.
Awesome. Well, thank you, Dan. I am going to figure out, because I am a technological genius, how we can put your book up on the screen. I
can do this. This is like a...
Aha! There we have it. So, thank you. This has been Dan Ariely, author of Misbelief, What Makes Rational People Believe Irrational Things. And I'm Steve Robbins. Thank you very much. Dan, where can people find you and where can they buy the book?
Online, www.danariely.com, DANARIELY.com.
Awesome. Thank you very much.
Lovely to spend.